Matt, thank you. So after all those great statistics and reports that Claire's just been talking about, I'm now going to take you into the very murky world, the dark arts of animal behaviour and of dog behaviour in particular. Addressing the specific needs of dogs coming into rescue, it's kind of about a week's talk, and we'd maybe just about have scratched the surface of it. And I'm going to try and do it in half an hour. And there's also a little bit of a sort of teaching grandmothers to suck eggs about this talk, because most of you are doing it. You're out there doing it every single day, and you're doing it better than I could. So what I'm probably going to do over the next half hour is talk partly to clarify things that you're already doing, possibly to end up giving you far more questions than I give you answers, and then talking mostly about why dogs are specifically different. We've already heard about the specific needs of German Shepherds, of Greyhounds, and so just why dogs are so specifically different. And because Claire's been talking about assessment, I'm going to slant it towards the assessment side of things. But hopefully it'll be useful for all kinds of dealings that you're going to have with different types of dogs. There is, without doubt, a need to have some kind of assessment criteria. I've seen some really, really bad assessments. I've seen assessments where people are doing completely inappropriate tests on dogs, but more to the point, I've seen a lot of assessments where people aren't interpreting the results particularly well, because they're not realizing that dogs are all very, very different. So I come from the world of companion dog training, and thankfully in the last 5 or 10 years, there's been a massive shift. People have started to realize that it isn't a one-size-fits-all. All dogs are totally different. I mean, when I started dog training, you would go to all these dreadful training classes in village halls up and down the countryside, where trainers kind of thought that all dogs just played by the same rules. And the only ones that were actually succeeding were the border collies, because they're the only ones who do actually play by those rules. Everybody else was coming away thinking their dogs were completely stupid. And you can still see trainers out there that are still doing that. They still think that dogs all play by the same rules. The problem is, the dogs haven't read the same books that they're reading, which is the problem. So many people think that, say, your border collies are all clever. Other breeds, if they're not border collies, are all just completely stupid. Who's the stupid one? That's what I want to know. For us to realize why dogs are all so different, we have to realize that they're bred to do really, really different jobs. And if we understand how they're developed to do all these different jobs, we've got a far better way of dealing with them. When dogs moved into our lives about 15,000 years ago, our ancestors found that there were some jobs that dogs were really, really good at. Some of them were good at herding, some at retrieving things, some at killing vermin. But these dogs, these animals that had moved into our lives, were good at doing specific jobs. And so what our ancestors would do is they would breed dogs together who were good at doing those jobs. So if our ancestors wanted a dog who was really, really good at going and getting us stuff, he'd take a dog that was good at getting stuff, breed it to a bitch that was good at getting them stuff, and the hope would be that they'd have puppies who were, well, really good at going and getting them stuff. That was all our ancestors cared about. They didn't care what they looked like. We didn't have some sort of prehistoric kennel club. All they cared about was that they could do that specific job. What our ancestors didn't realize what they were doing was they were taking the dog's predatory sequence. The sequence that dogs do, that all predators do, to catch, hunt their prey. And the predatory sequence in dogs, as it is in every single predator, is eye, stalk, chase, grab, bite, kill, bite, eat. That's what it is. So in other words, I see what it is that I'm going to go and hunt. I creep up on it, so that when I do chase it, I've got a half-decent chance of catching it. Then we chase it. Then we have to stop it, so we grab bite it, then we kill it, then we eat it. So that's the predatory sequence in dogs. Eye, stalk, chase, grab, bite, kill, bite, eat. What our ancestors were doing when they were breeding dogs that could do a specific job was they were taking dogs who were really good at doing some parts of that sequence, but weren't so great at doing other parts. So for example, those dogs that they wanted that were going to go and get them stuff, what they did was they took a dog who was really good at doing eye, stalk, chase, grab, bite. So they go, oh, there it is, go and pick it up. What comes next? Never mind, I'll just carry it around, that'll be great. And that's what they did when they bred retrievers. They took dogs that were really good at doing eye, stalk, chase, grab, bite. One of the most important things to know about dogs, nothing to do with assessment at all, but just for when you are working with dogs, when you're working with lots of different breeds of dogs, when you're advising clients, when you're advising people who are taking dogs from you, the predatory sequence, or the bit of the predatory sequence that dogs have inherited, aren't just things that they like doing. They are things that they absolutely need to do. Nature is spectacularly clever. Nature knows that the first few times an animal goes out and hunts, they're going to get it wrong. They've never done it before. They're going to be completely and utterly useless at it. They'll go out and do, I stalk, oh, what comes next? Oh, God, it's gone. Oh, well, never mind. If the predatory sequence needed an external reward, so the reward of actually having success, they would fail the first few times. They wouldn't bother doing it again because it didn't work, and so they would die out. So nature makes sure that when the dog does the predatory sequence, or that bit of the predatory sequence that they've inherited, their brain floods with all those feel-good neurochemicals that makes them feel absolutely fantastic. Which is why when any of you that have Labradors and Retrievers, when they meet you at your front door when you've been out and they've got your slippers in their mouth and they've got this great big doggy grin and this huge wag and they're just thinking life is fabulous, it's not because your slippers are the most amazing things in the world. It's because their brains have flooded with those feel-good chemicals, the dopamine, that's going to make them feel that the world is fantastic. So dogs don't just want to do that bit of the predatory sequence they've inherited, they need to do it. So when our ancestors were breeding retrievers, that's what they were breeding. Dogs that did eye, stalk, chase, grab, bite. For people who were breeding herding dogs, they wanted something that would do eye, stalk, chase. And collies will do that all day, eye, stalk, chase. They don't go on to do the grab, bite because we didn't want them to grab the sheep. Actually, when our ancestors were breeding collies, they wanted something more than just eye, stalk, chase. What they wanted was eye, stalk, chase, which if any of you have got collies, you know all about that. Number of collies that get themselves into some real dog-to-dog problems with other dogs, because other dogs don't understand a dog that plays by going. Rottweilers really don't like it. It's really, really embarrassing to kind of say, your dog started it. He looked at mine a bit funny. But again, that's what they wanted, a dog that would do eye, stalk, chase, and kind of do that all day. Terriers, now they're interesting ones. With terriers are bred to kill vermin, and they're bred to kill vermin in small spaces, most of them. So they obviously have to eye them. They've got to see where they are. No point in stalking them because they're there. No point in chasing them because they're there. Grab bite's kind of a waste of time. So with a terrier, what you've got is something that does eye, kill, bite. Great, isn't it? That doesn't mean that your terriers are all going out to try and kill things. Well, most of them, anyway. What it does mean, however, is that we have bred a dog intentionally that is really, really highly reactive. Rats don't tend to sit around waiting to be killed, and so you need a dog that the minute it goes, oh, it's there, I'm having it. So this was what our ancestors were doing when they were trying to breed different breeds of dogs to do different jobs. The thing is, it wasn't just the predatory sequence that they were breeding into dogs as well. We're just talking about terriers, highly, highly reactive. They've been bred to be reactive because we want them to work really, really quickly. We also intentionally bred dogs who were fearful. Sounds crazy, but we did. That's why dogs guard. We were talking about German Shepherds a little bit earlier. Don't anybody think that German Shepherds guard because they're big, butch, scary dogs? They guard because they're scared. They guard but out of fear. That's what German Shepherds do. German Shepherds are there. They might look like that, and they look a bit scary, but what they're actually doing is, there's somebody coming, there's someone coming, we're all going to be murdered in our beds, somebody do something. It comes from fear. Can you imagine a basset hound or a bloodhound guard dog? It would be like, never. Because we haven't bred them to be fearful. We have intentionally bred dogs who do certain jobs incredibly well. We've also bred some dogs intentionally to be highly reactive and highly fearful. And it's because of the way they've developed that we have dogs that behave in such different ways as well. If any of you have heard me talking before about puppy socialization and habituation, probably lots of you will have done, because I'll talk to anybody who stands still for long enough about it. I'm absolutely passionate about habituation and socialization, because basically if a dog, all animals are neophobic. They're scared of new stuff. All animals are scared of new stuff. That is the instinct that stops rabbits bouncing up to wolves and going, hey, Mr. Wolf, who are you, and getting eaten. Nature assumes that if you don't know what it is, it's very probably dangerous. And if it's dangerous, you should avoid it. And so that's how animals are developed. That's why you can't get near wild animals. But for a newly born animal to be neophobic would be counterproductive, because every single thing is new. So for a newly born animal, there's a really, really small period of time where everything they meet, they'll just accept as being part of life. If it's not scary and doesn't have a bad outcome, they will just accept it as being part of life. And in a wild animal, that period is about 19 days. Nature, again, assumes that everything that that animal is going to see and is going to have to experience in their life, they're going to have met in that 19-day period. With the domestication of dogs, we've pushed that period to about 49 days, which is about 7 weeks. Everything they meet in that sort of first 49 days, they're going to be completely accepting of. They're just going to go, wow, new things, that's really exciting. After that period, they're going to go, whoa, okay, that's all a little bit worrying. That starts at about 49 days in most dogs. It's kind of quite exciting, this, isn't it? Someone trying to tell me something. So that is where it is in most dogs. In German Shepherds, we're talking about German Shepherds. That period in German Shepherds kicks in at about 37 days. You've got a really, really narrow window where they can experience lots and lots of different things, otherwise they're going to be fearful. That's what we intentionally bred, because we wanted a dog who would guard for us. Labradors and retrievers, these dogs who are great at going and getting us stuff, they're right up the other end of that. That's why they get such a good reputation as being a really, really good family dog, because they've had this great long period where they've learnt that there's loads and loads of things that aren't scary in life that they're then going to take on to later life. So that's why they get that reputation for being so good pretty much at life. We have intentionally bred dogs to be very, very different. And so they are all going to behave very differently to stimulus because of the way that we have developed them. Before we can start to assess behavior, it's probably worth just remembering what behavior actually is. Because we do tend to kind of forget that. Certainly the Daily Mail tends to forget that. When you see all these great headlines of aggressive dogs, there aren't aggressive dogs. There are dogs who, for some reason, behave in an aggressive way. I'm not an aggressive person. At least I hope nobody would think I'm an aggressive person. But I can guarantee there are things that you could do to me or circumstances that I could find myself in where I would behave aggressively. All behavior is the symptom of an emotion. None of you are going to jump up in the air and wave your arms in the air for no great reason. If I told you that you'd won the lottery, then you would all feel elation and you would feel absolutely fantastic, and so you'd jump up in the air and wave your arms in the air. All behavior is the symptom of an emotion. You feel a certain way, and so you behave a certain way. All of those dogs are behaving because they feel a certain way, and it's really, really obvious how they feel. The behavior is just what follows that. So when we start to look at assessment, when we start to look at when we're going to work with dogs, when we're going to assess dogs, whether we're assessing them when they come into rescue, whether we're assessing them before we rehome them, whether we're assessing them for legal cases, whether we're assessing them so that people can just get the very, very best dog for them, we need to think about what is going to impact on behavior. Oop, that jumped. What's going to impact on behavior when we are assessing those dogs? First of all, anything that causes fear or frustration, a dog is going to behave in a negative way. Anything that provides pleasure or relief, they're going to do more often. That's just basic training, basic learning theory, and the way that dogs learn. However, what's really going to affect dogs when we're assessing them are things like novelty. If dogs haven't been socialized and habituated to lots of different people, places, sights, and sounds, they are not going to behave as you are going to expect them to behave when they get out into the real world. Stress obviously also impacts on behavior. If a dog is stressed, then they're not going to show themselves off to their best, they're not going to have the same tolerance, they're not going to have the same bounce back that they would have at other times. Pain is a big one on behavior. We can't assess dogs accurately if they're in pain. You know what you're like. If you have a horrible migraine headache, if somebody comes up and annoys you even slightly, you'll take their heads off just about. Pain has a big impact on behavior. Fear obviously has a huge impact on behavior, as does frustration. We see frustration a lot for those people, and probably quite a lot of you work with bull breeds and bull breed crosses. Bull breeds and bull breed crosses do not deal with frustration very well at all. First of all, they come from a species that far enough back do eye kill bite. We've bred them to be really reactive. So they are really quite reactive. But they don't deal with frustration well, and they're actually really, really, really sensitive souls, and they get stressed very, very easily. The other thing that impacts on behavior is an inability to succeed. All animals need to succeed. They need to be able to influence their environment. They need to be getting successes in life, and a lot of the time we keep them in situations where they can't do that. All of these are triggers for dogs. When you are assessing them, you have to be really careful not to just think, well, he's in a strange place, but he copes all right with that. And he's a little bit stressed, but he normally copes all right with that. And yeah, he does get a bit frustrated, but he normally copes with that. Triggers don't work like that. If you think of triggers being a little bit like wine, they add up. One plus another plus another plus another doesn't just equal one quite a few times. In fact, it tends to equal, as most of you who are going to the dinner tonight will probably realize, about midnight tonight. Triggers add up, triggers stack for dogs. A dog can possibly put up with a strange place, can put up with noise, can put up with a bit of pain, but as soon as you get one on top of the other, that's when you quite easily reach bite threshold with dogs. There's quite a few things that mask an animal's behavior as well. The person who is assessing them quite often can be one of them. A lot of the people who I'm very much a reward-based dog trainer. I reward using positive reinforcement. Most of the people who tell me that it's far better to use positive punishment to train dogs tend to be 6'6", very, very stocky built men, because they can get away with it. I can't. Trust me, dogs behave very, very differently with different people. Sometimes I think people think dogs are quite stupid and they don't realize that a big 6'6" man is the same as a small 5-foot woman. Quite often, dogs will mask their behavior if they're intimidated by the person that's assessing them. One of the other things that masks behavior, quite often, one of the big problems is an awful lot of the temperament tests and the things that we do to assess temperament in dogs doesn't actually assess their temperament at all. It doesn't assess their training at all. It assesses their desire to get that resource. Most people train for food. Remember, if dogs are worried, nervous, or anxious, they won't eat. If you go into the fight-flight response, you can't eat. Your body shuts down every single part of the body, every single system that isn't necessary to survive. That's why if you have a dog that's stressed, they can't take treats. So quite often, a lack of interest in resources will change a behavior in a dog completely differently. Be aware, when we talk about fight-flight response, fight's obvious. Flight isn't always as obvious. We think about flight of dogs running away, but quite often dogs run away emotionally or they run away mentally. You do it yourself. If you go to the dentist and you're about to have something horrible done, you will lie there trying to imagine that you're on a beautiful tropical beach anywhere apart from having some man sticking a bit of metal into your mouth. You flight just as accurately as dogs do. And that's when you see the learned helplessness, the shutting down of dogs, that quite often you think they're actually being quiet and really well behaved, and they're actually not. They're under a massive amount of stress. The other thing that will mask behavior is stoicism. Again, we talked about bull breeds. Quite often Labradors, quite a lot of breeds, don't like to show they're in pain. So quite often, you won't realize the dog's in pain. You start to assess a dog, and you'll get a really extreme response because they've been very stoic up until that point. So one of the things that we have to try and do when we're working with dogs in rescue, or whether we're trying to assess them, is to level the playing field a little bit, to make sure that we're giving them a chance to succeed, because we know they are all different. Breeds and types are all going to respond in a completely different way to the same stimulus. First of all, recognizing breeds and types and recognizing their differences. Labradors are going to be massively, hugely enthusiastic about stuff. It's very easy to rate them far higher on a scale of friendliness than something like a hound who just sort of slowly comes up to you and leans on you. Trust me, they feel just as much love as a Labrador does. They just show it in very, very different ways. Check for pain. Don't do an assessment on the dog if you have any suspicion that that dog is going to be in pain. Assess the stresses in the environment where you're working with the dog, whether you're training the dog or assessing the dog. Try and reduce those stresses and try and notice what they are. If you get a chance, read some of Temple Grandin's books. A lot of animal welfare people obviously don't agree with what she does, because part of the majority of her work is about developing slaughterhouses that are going to not put animals under stress and is going to reduce the stressors. But what she is incredibly good at doing is seeing what stresses animals in terms of sights and sounds and smells and textures and feel. There's a real art to assessing a dog and to just looking around and trying to see things from a dog's perspective, whether it's flooring. Some dogs struggle to walk on slippery floors. Others are better on carpets and grass. Try and work out what the stresses are for each individual dog. The reactive dogs that we talked about earlier, they're bred to react quickly, and so they're going to be more worried about things moving, about noises, about strange things going on. Give them a chance to succeed as well. Claire was talking very much about assessing the positives. Before you start doing anything to dogs that could be seen to be at all aversive, make sure they've had a chance to succeed first. Find out what they are good at, what they will work for, what rewards them. And quite often that is breed specific. If you are assessing something that's a scent hound, get them doing some sniffing work first, because that's what's going to release all the dopamine in their brains, the serotonin, make them feel far, far more positive. Give them chances to succeed before you put them under any pressure. You're trying to balance their brain chemistry as much as possible. If any of you ever, I've got 4 minutes, I'm fine. If any of you ever do clicker training, it's really easy to clicker train breeds like your Labradors, your Retrievers, your Collies. Sometimes it's really, really hard to clicker train bull breeds. I was told out in Barcelona when I worked out there, out at the iCorp conference, that you couldn't clicker train pit bulls. The person that told me had been chomped by said pit bull. That was why he said that you couldn't do it. But what you have to be aware of is when you're clicker training, you're balancing two emotions. When they get it right, you're clicking and treating, so they feel pleasure. When they don't get it right, you're withholding the treat, and you are using the emotion of frustration. Bull breeds don't do that well with frustration because they feel quite high frustration levels anyway. And so if you're clicker training bull breeds, you really have to make sure that you are rewarding them a lot and giving them lots and lots and lots of chances to succeed, because it's only then that the frustration levels start to come down. Assess the positives as much as the negatives. Know what is going to be rewarding for every single dog. You can't assess a dog that you don't have a way of rewarding or that you don't have something that he is going to work for. Look at what they're originally bred to do, and you will get an awful lot of ideas as to how you can work with those dogs, how you can reward them. The number of times I've seen people assessing dogs and they will push a dog until the dog reacts. That is not what you're doing when you're assessing dogs. When you're assessing dogs, what you're trying to do is you're trying to get a predictor of how they're going to behave in the future. You're not trying to assess their breaking point. That is just a complete lose-lose situation. Again, find appropriate rewards for each individual. And when you are housing these dogs before assessment, give them breed-specific enrichment. It's fine to throw toys and have toys for dogs, but very, very, very few dogs will play by those rules. They need things to hunt out, to sniff. The terriers need things to be able to rip apart and tear. That's how you're going to get their brains in a situation where you have got a half-decent chance of giving them a fair crack of the whip. As I said earlier, dogs behave differently with different people. You do not know where these dogs are going to end up. Try and get them assessed at least twice with very, very different people. A dog is going to behave very differently with a man to how they do with a woman, to a loud person, to a small person. Try and have them assessed by different people. Assess them at different times of the day as well. We don't always know what a dog's triggers are. We don't always know whether they're smelling something strange, whether they're feeling something, seeing something, hearing something. We don't know whereabouts in their blood sugar they are. Some dogs are better tested when they are slightly hungry, because then they're going to work for resources more. Other dogs are better being tested when they have had something to eat, because they'll be calmer. If you're using your best liver cake and you start working with a hungry Labrador, trust me, he's going to be all over the place. He can't concentrate on anything, it's just food. We were talking about the fact that dogs behave completely and utterly differently in a home environment to how they ever do in a rescue situation. They're not competing for resources. There aren't the stressors. There aren't the triggers. Having said that, they are more confident and they are more secure. Behavior can be really different. If you have the resources and the facilities to do it, try and get them out in a home environment. Obviously, the ideal would be that every single dog gets fostered, but that's never, ever going to happen. But some dogs are going to behave very, very differently in a home environment. It's only when we actually understand why dogs are so different that we give them the best chance of succeeding in the world that we have actually expected them to live in. Very, very few dogs do the jobs that they were originally bred to do, but they all still have the hardwired need to do it. We have to be 20 seconds, you'll be lucky. This, however, is all reactive. All of you who have heard me talking before about puppies and puppy socialization, I will give the puppy plan another big plug. We need to be looking at preventing behaviors and not trying to assess them when we've got them. Otherwise, well, you know, in 40 years' time, we're all still going to be here. While it is really important that we do get guidelines on assessments, we have to be aware that we can't just have blanket things for every single dog. Another Temple Grandin quote, people are always looking for the single magic bullet that will change everything. There is no single magic bullet. There isn't. We just need to find out as much as we possibly can about the breeds that we're working with. We can get better armed, just with knowledge. And when it comes to breeds and types of dog, they're all different. They're all bred to do different things. We have to help make them the very best they can be, not expect them to be something else. As Einstein said, if you judge a fish by his ability to climb a tree, he'll go through life thinking he's stupid. We shouldn't be holding our Staffordshire Bull Terriers or our Greyhounds up to the same criteria as our Labradors and our Border Collies. We've got to work with what they were originally bred to do. And I will shut up, Matt.
Carolyn.
That was very much a whistle-stop tour. If there's anything that I said that you want to talk to me a little bit further about, I will be around for the rest of the conference, so please corner me.
Carolyn, thank you very much for persevering through this. Ladies and gentlemen, the lighting system has got a mind of its own. The guys over the back there are very, very upset because they can't do a thing at the moment. It's in control of itself. It clearly needs some assessment and rehabilitative training.